Hello, 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 everyone. Happy New Year. I know we are already heading into February, but as I've mentioned on social and in email and in all the things, now that we're finally out of Mercury and Mars retrograde, now that we had Venus entering Pisces last week, now that we have a beautiful full moon in Leo coming up soon this weekend, and now that we're in between eclipses, just from even from an astrological standpoint, it feels like all right, we're ready for the new year, which is why I kind of held off on doing this until later on in the month. And by later on in the month, I mean the end of the month. So hello, hello, hello. Dr. Rowena Winkler here, and welcome to, I think this is the first time for the biz that I've streamed from my new little alcove here in the new house. It's very exciting. I'm hoping to have more to zhuzh it up a bit, but anywho, let's get right into the presentation. I'm very excited to talk about alignment and the various areas that we can get aligned and the questions that we can ask ourselves. And stay tuned, because all the folks that are watching this, watching the replay, are participating. Y'all will get a fancy schmancy fillable PDF workbook that you can go through afterward. And then if you feel even more inclined, we can chat about it on a call together. So with that said, let's head on over to the slides here. Alrighty. So oh no, dang it, what happened? My goodness. The tech. All right. For those of you that don't know me, hello. As I mentioned, I'm Dr. Rowena Winkler. I am a coach. I work with primarily women as an empowerment and authenticity coach. I talk a lot about the inner muse, which essentially is that voice inside, that essence of our true selves that's just dying to come out. But because of all the other things that get in the way, it's a bit tricky to get there. And so with my expertise in communication and in astrology, human design, I also read the tarot. I use a lot of these modalities and incorporate them to help my clients find their voice, push past perfectionism, get to that authentic self, and we have a good time doing it. In addition to that, I am a professor. I teach strategic communication classes. I've taught public speaking and writing. So things like this, despite my slides getting all janky in the beginning there, despite all this, I really enjoy teaching. That's something I love to do. And of course, I cannot, being a mom, I feel like was a turning point in a lot of this. It's what motivated me to pursue being an entrepreneur and to do this business. And a lot of what I do is to role model for my beautiful daughter, which in this picture, she's little now. She's almost 3, which is hard to believe, my pandemic child. So, a lot of what I do is for her and for all the folks that I work with. The different areas. So we're going to be looking at various different areas today, and I'm going to give you some tips, some questions, some areas to think about, to focus on, to consider when we're talking about alignment from different aspects. And over the past month, every week I've been posting reels and about these different areas. And so I want to get into the nitty-gritty of those 3 areas, which are relationships, career, and spiritual practice. And then, as you may have seen in my little preview when I jumped ahead in the slides, we're going to also look at a couple of different additional areas as well. So when it comes to relationships, when we're talking about alignment in relationships, and I don't mean just romantic relationships, this can be in any sort of relationship that you are participating in, that you're engaging in, right? So it can be romantic. It can also be friendships. It can be work relationships. It can be, supervisor employee relationships, right? It can be parental relationships. It can be relationships with your child. Sky's the limit here. I'm not just saying this is for you and your lover. This can be with anyone. So as I mentioned, I previewed this in one of my reels. There are 4 C's that I developed when it comes to thinking about alignment in relationships. The first is consistency. And what do I mean by that? When we are asking ourselves if we are aligned in the relationships that we voluntarily, right? We we intentionally are a part of these relationships. Consistency relates to patterns. And what I mean patterns is patterns of behavior. So looking at the consistency of behavior, not just with your partner, but with yourself as well, right? Are there patterns of behavior? Is there a consistency of behavior that perhaps you don't really jive with, right? That perhaps you may need to take a step back and consider, I'm not sure if I'm into this. I'm not sure if this is, if I'm vibing with this type of behavior. I don't know if I want this type of behavior in my life. And I love that there are friends here. Feel free to comment and ask questions as we go along. So if there is a consistency of behavior, that's something to look at. The next piece is clarity. And clarity is more about doing your own internal audit, your own dive in terms of digging deep and figuring out, what do you want? I feel like oftentimes, whether it's because of a longevity of a relationship or because we met folks when we were in a different phase of our lives, there are these moments, and this is a great time, right? We're at the start of the year to gain some clarity in terms of, is this what I want in a relationship? Is this what I want in a partnership? Is this what I want from an employer, right? So digging deep and figuring out, what are your must-haves? What are the deal breakers? Really considering what those things are and gaining clarity on that. And then what I mean by constancy is being constant and staying true to your needs. And again, that may involve some consideration, some thinking through, what are my needs? And sometimes once we figure out what those needs are, it's setting those boundaries, right? Setting loving boundaries. I know for a lot of us, and listen, y'all, I'm a Pisces. So I say I have permeable boundaries. Boundaries can be really hard for a lot of folks, but think of boundaries as a loving act, right? Boundaries are a way that we have self-love and self-care, and we understand what we need and what we are expecting from other people. And then lastly, compassion. First of all, compassion for yourself, because oftentimes, as I mentioned, we're in these relationships for whatever reason, and it can take a lot of courage to make the realization that this isn't working for me anymore. And it doesn't have to be this big dramatic breakup, right? Sometimes we just move on. Sometimes we're just in different life phases. Sometimes we're just not in alignment anymore. And that's totally okay. So having compassion for yourself, if you feel like maybe we need to move on, having compassion for yourself as you're gaining that clarity and you're learning about the consistency and you are learning constancy, and then compassion for others as well, right? Again, relationships, they're two-way. It's not just you, right? There's another party involved. So having compassion and empathy and being able to meet folks where they are and understanding where others are coming from. Now, I'll say right here that, not everyone is as open in terms of having those conversations. And if this is something that you've been struggling with in relationships in your life, back in December last year, I did a Having Courageous Conversations class that you may want to check out. There's a masterclass page on my website that you can see all the classes I've taught in the past year. So, see where others are coming from and having that compassion and understanding that sometimes you can't control other people, but you can be in control of you and your reactions and the boundaries you set, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 4 C's. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about that. But those are 4 ways that you can think about alignment in terms of relationships. So there's that first bit. The second area is in terms of career. And, I personally, as a coach, have a lot of experience with this. I work with a lot of folks, especially that are looking to pivot from academia to industry, like I did back in 2017. And, careers can be a big deal for a lot of people, right? A lot of folks may just be doing the 9 to 5 or doing the job because, it pays the bills, right? Which we need to do, unfortunately. But I think it would behoove ourselves if you're like me. I know a lot of people may not be like this, but I'm definitely one of those people that's like, I have to feel fulfilled in my work. I have to do what lights me up. So asking ourselves these questions or looking at these particular areas. So the first way that we can gain more alignment in our career is a Japanese notion or process called the ikigai. And ikigai in Japanese is the reason for being. So there are four areas to look at when you are trying to discover, where can I be aligned when it comes to work? And the ikigai, there are four areas, as I mentioned. What do I love, right? What do I love to do? What am I good at? And I know this can be tricky because I've certainly talked to clients about this before. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you have to get paid for it. Because I know folks are good at a lot of things, but we don't necessarily like it. That's why. What do I love? What am I good at? What can I be paid for? I know that can be tricky, right? We want to get paid for many things, but sometimes it's just not possible, or I don't know. And then the last question to ask ourselves in terms of ikigai is, what does the world need? Now, if this is something in particular that you're like, oh my goodness, Rowena, like this is so interesting. I do have a worksheet, right? Let me know. I can definitely send it your way. I have a worksheet that I've used with my clients to have them fill out and consider this because it really can be an eye-opening experience in terms of what can I do for my career. So that's a key guy. Then there's the criteria, right? And I mentioned this, I alluded to this a bit in the relationships bit, but what I mean by criteria is when it comes to a job, when it comes to career, when it comes to your career trajectory, what are your must haves? Like I must have the ability to work remote. I must have XYZ number of PTO. I must have flexibility because I'm a mom and I need to pick up my kids. It's at this particular time, right? So what are the must haves in terms of your criteria? What are the nice to haves? Like, oh, that'd be cool if this thing was part of the job. And then the ultimate deal breakers. Like, no way am I going to work for a place that does this. No way am I going to work for an organization that does not have a DEI process or policy in place. No way am I going to work for an organization that has all white older men on the leadership, right? Can you tell those are things that I usually look out for, right? So consider those areas, your must-haves, your nice-to-haves, and your deal breakers. And there are different ways that you can go about exploring what those are. You could just journal about it, right? You want to just get a piece of paper, make 3 columns or make 3 lists and write those things there. I had a client that I worked with last year that was super fancy and made a spreadsheet, right? If you're here for Excel and you love spreadsheets, you can have spreadsheets, you can do like conditioning with colors and whatnot, right? Based on the job. So if you want to be fancy, do that. If you're more of the mystical like type like I am, you can even do some card pulls, right? You can get an oracle deck or use a tarot deck and kind of, tap in that way and try to figure what those things are for you. Those are some ways that you can explore what that criteria is for you in terms of the job. And then the last bit is the models, right? So if you're familiar with my work or my framework, the Intermuse method, the first piece of that framework is M for model. So models are really important, I find, because it gives you a very concrete sense of who you aspire to be, right? Like, who do you want to be when you grow up? A lot of you know that I love Oprah. I'm here for her. We both have a media background. I love interviewing and talking to people. Like I just the work that she's done I find to be amazing, right? So who do I aspire to be? So what are those models? And something that I've done with my own clients when it comes to finding alignment in career or finding what we want to do in career is looking at the LinkedIn pages of folks that we admire, right? Because on LinkedIn, you can see trajectories, right? Oh, so and so went from this job to this job, and then they did this, and right? It gives you a sense of perspective as well, because oftentimes I know a lot of us are like, eek, why am I not in this like amazing job right now? Sometimes it takes people a little bit longer, and not everyone shoots up in that way. That can be a misconception for some folks. So it gives you a sense of, you know, where people have come from, right? I'm always a fan of, I love reading memoirs and autobiographies or even stories, if you want to get a sense of how folks organize their day, right? So who are those models? And then another way to look at another way that I've looked at models are in terms of like inner child work and just child work, because you can go back to, what did you enjoy as a child? What did you like doing as a child before, we had to do adulting and we had to make money, right? Is there something that you can come back to that maybe you can explore, that maybe you can tap into, that can lead you to another type of employment if you're looking for that, right? So, use yourself as a model in terms of how you were way back when, before life got serious. That's a way to look at models as well. So those are three areas in terms of career to explore as you're figuring out how to get more in alignment. Again, feel free to ask questions. Anise said, I love to write mystery short stories. Ooh, I love that. I was a fan of, what was it? Well, I no, I didn't read Nancy Drew or anything like that. I read a lot of Babysitter's Clubs, not really mystery. I'm trying to think of, what did I like to do? Mysteries was not something I wrote, but I love that. I wonder how can we tap into that? Storytelling, I mean, I feel is such a huge uh skill set that a lot of people take for granted, but is not easy to do. So let's explore that, roll with that, Anise. I love that. Okay, so that's career. Now let's talk about the spiritual practice. I just posted the reel right before this, literally right before I hopped on this and did this class. I was away on a ski trip with my family over the weekend, so it took a little bit of a break, and I think it was very uh it was good for me to be able to reset in that way. But which is great, because here we are at spiritual practice. Here's the thing. Um when it comes to your spiritual practice, several things that I've discovered as someone who, I feel like, I haven't been in it like super long, like I haven't been into it for 20 years, but just in the, I can't even calculate how long it's been for me in terms of like a consistent or a more intentional spiritual practice. But number one, first and foremost, is that it's always evolving, right? When it comes to your spiritual practice, it evolves. It depends on where you are in your life, what's going on. I know that a part of my journey, a lot of you know that one of the big milestones, in addition to my daughter being born in 2020, was my father passing away. We almost 10 years this year, in 2013, right? So that led me to a path on exploring my spirituality. It depends, it can evolve on what you like, right? For example, I've moved from, and it depends on my mood, right? Depends on how I'm feeling in the day. Sometimes it's a good, nice, juicy yoga practice that I get really in my body and I'm moving. Sometimes it's EFT tapping, as you know. I have videos on YouTube if that's something you want to explore. Sometimes it's just a meditation. Sometimes it's journaling, free writing. Sometimes it's taking a walk, right? So it can change. It's always evolving. It depends on, where you are. Maybe even like physically, right? So are you, I was at a lake house. Is it, since I'm in nature, does that help, right? Are you visiting someone that you can? So it's an always evolving process. And what's also beautiful about uh discovering the spiritual practice and exploring it is it's so educational. I feel like for me, I mean, gosh, I feel like 2 years ago, I didn't really know EFT tapping. 2 years ago, I didn't know about NLP. 2 years ago, I wasn't so deep in my tarot practice, right? So there's always something new to explore, always something to learn, even in astrology, right? Like I've been practicing astrology for a very long time, but I'm always learning. I think that's what I love about it too, right? You're always learning. You can always find new modalities. You can always try new shit that's going to work for you. There should be a third bullet point here that didn't make it in the slide, but it's the expansion, right? That the spiritual practice, it causes this expansion. The more that you do it, the more that you get comfortable, the easier then that you can connect to that higher power, whatever that is, right? For you, God, source, goddess, mama universe. I like call her mama uni a lot, right? So your practice expands. As I've mentioned this to a lot of folks, when I was pregnant the first time with my kiddo, that was probably the first. I felt so like I was so open, like I was able to really get in it, such a groundedness to be pregnant. And like I was able to just like I was like, hey yo, like my spiritual guides were hanging out. I was like, what is happening? Right. So yeah. And yes, Anise, I love that. Yeah, it opens up mindset. It expands the way you see the world. It expands the way that you experience the world, right? When you have a consistent spiritual practice or a realigned spiritual practice, you're able to be present more. There's a mindfulness, there's an intentionality that I know for a lot of us, especially I'm on the East Coast, it's just, or I guess the Mid-Atlantic, I don't know. We live in a place where it's like, let's always move. But it really helps us there. And then the last point here is that it emits energy. Energetically, you feel that, right? When you connect, if you've ever been in like a circle, or if you've ever connected in a new moon or full moon practice, or you've been at a retreat, or you've been with like-minded folks in this way, even just church, right? If you're at a church, in a church community, or in a community that you're all on the same page from a spiritual standpoint, you can build that community. And that's if you choose, right? I know that a lot of folks prefer to engage solo, and that's totally fine. You do you, boo. What works for you? If you need that community to stay accountable, if you need that community to do that expansion bit and to educate yourself and learn more and to evolve, like that's cool. And obviously we're over here, I'm always happy to guide and to help in any way possible. So that energy exchange is like, like you just feel so good. You just feel so light. I know that I've left, like, for example, cacao ceremonies and things like that, like, woo, or just like deep, hypnotherapy or anything like that. Again, another modality, right? There's just been sometimes I'm like, ooh, and it just being in community with that is so, so special. So here are some ways that, to explore the spiritual practice and the benefits to that and how you can continue growing in that practice. And I personally am feeling like just in the past couple of years, I think with COVID, right? My therapist called it the collective retreat. COVID really changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And I think we're exploring these areas a bit more and figuring out our spirituality and our spiritual practices. So now's a good time. I think we're really expanding our collective consciousness a lot more. And it's just going to keep on growing from there. So hop on. It's a great ride. And if there's anything I can do, let me know. All right. So there's the spiritual practice. Now let's keep on going. Let's keep on rocking and rolling. Okay. So the last three areas are, I feel like, more prompts or more questions to ask. I feel like the first three, based off of my explanation, it was like, here are some things. These are more, what are some considerations? So when we're talking about learning, and you know me, I got my PhD. I love to learn, lifelong learner here, always curious. Here are some questions to ask yourself when it comes to learning. Have you given yourself, okay, actually, before I get to that first question, I want to just put it out there. Whether you like it or not, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you're cognizant of not, you're always learning. You're always learning something. Maybe it's subconscious, but we're always receiving information, sometimes probably too much information, but we're constantly learning. We're always learning something. We'll be open to the learning, okay? So, since we're always receiving information and learning, do you give yourself the opportunity to choose? We can be intentional with what we're learning. We can be intentional with what we're receiving, you know? Are we scrolling through Instagram and just feeling like shit because we're following accounts that make us feel like shit, right? Like, are we, again, this goes back to relationships piece. Are we hanging out with folks that are teaching us maybe things that maybe we shouldn't be learning in terms of how to engage with people? What are we learning what are we learning in different areas? And we have the power to choose. We have the you have we have the ability, like, thank goodness, thank goddess for that. We have the ability to choose. We can choose what we want to learn, right? And listen, you don't have to pay $5,000 to do it either. Right? Self-study is just as important, and you don't have to be like me either. I feel like I joke because I get really into something and then I like switch hobbies like very, very rapidly, like figure out what works. And you can do that too, experiment. And is there something, there we do this a lot to ourselves where we're like, oh man, I really want to learn blah. I really want to learn how to play the guitar. I really want to learn how to cook. I really want to learn how to read the tarot. I really want to learn more about astrology. I really want to learn how to lead meditation. I don't know. I'm just making things up now. But, consider, is there something that you've wanted to explore that you've said that, oh, maybe when such and such happens, I'll do it? Now's the time. Let's do it. Now's the time. Like, think about it, and you can journal about it. You can make a list of, things I want to explore. Right? And drop it down. And listen, you don't have to do it all tomorrow. You don't have to be like, I'm going to learn 50,000 things by the end of the year. No, start small, take baby steps. Prioritize, like, ooh, I really want to learn how to publish my book. Right. I really want to learn how to get my podcast off the ground. Those are two things, by the way, that I'm I'm working on. Right. So what do you want to explore? And what lessons have you, and I said this year, but I think, last year, right? What lessons have we learned in the past year? Because that's part of it too, right? Despite us wanting to start fresh all the time, it's easier said than done, like, things happen to us. We experience things, sometimes challenging things that can change how we see things, can be a perceptual filter for how we experience the world and things. And I'm a firm believer of we learn even from the tough stuff, that we can learn something from that. And oftentimes I've found that the lesson may not come right away. Right? That the lesson may be something that comes to us much, much, much later. As I mentioned, my dad's death anniversary this year will be 10 years in the fall, in October, and I'm still learning things about that process, about that loss. So, yeah, what have we learned, and what more do we have to learn, right? Let's dig deep. Like, what more? Like, what more about ourselves, about the world, about each other, about all the things? So here are some things to think through as you're considering, in the space of learning, how can we get realigned in that sense? Okay. So that's learning. Let's look at creativity. And as a creative, again, Pisces gal, as a performer, as someone who very much values creativity, this is really important. And I'm going to mention this later. Even if you don't consider yourself a creative, you are a creative. Question number 1, have you given yourself the space to create? Again, I mentioned this before. We are inundated. We are so busy. We're so hyper, like, blah, 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 like doing all the things. Do you give yourself the space to create? Do you honor the time and respect yourself and give yourself that space to create? We get so busy and focused on other things that sometimes we don't have that space. Um and another question to ask when it comes to creativity is, do you know your best time of creation, right? And sometimes this may involve a little sacrifice or a little adjusting of the schedule. Um, I'm currently reading with a group from my coaching certification, Gal Pals, from last year. We're reading Discipline is Destiny. And one of the stories is Maya Angelou, right? Maya Angelou had two sons. You may resonate if you have children, but she got up early every morning to write, right? That was her time to create. That was her time to focus. Now, if you're not a morning person like me, right? Maybe it's blocking off a couple hours in the afternoon. Maybe it's finding time in the evening, right? So find your best time of creation and understand that it may differ for everyone. Everyone is different. People are more productive in the morning. Um, Maybe it's an intuitive hit. Maybe it's not so structured. Maybe it is like, and then you just have to toss everything aside and get to it. So know that it differs for everyone in terms of your best time of creation. What I mean about shame and guilt, what do you feel shame or guilt when it comes to tapping into your creativity, right? What do I mean that by that? A lot of us, I can feel like, oh, a glorified hobby, or oh, I should, right? It's like shoulding all over ourselves. Oh, I should instead be spending time with my family, or I should be doing this thing instead that's more, tangible in terms of outcome. But listen, y'all, as someone who is a deep proponent of the arts, finding time to be creative, it is the research shows the benefits are so, like, even as someone who's like a ballroom dancer, like, it improves memory, it helps us, with our brain synapses and things like that. I probably didn't say that correctly, but like, it really gets things firing up. And taking the time to step into our creative selves, it enables us to come out the other side and get shit done even more. Yeah. Yeah, the shooting is so hard, Anise. I know, I agree. The shooting is like, man, that's tough. Especially for women, especially for us doing our third shift, fourth shift. It's like, but no, it's so important because it permeates into everything else. It permeates into everything else when we find the time to be joyous in our creativity and our creation. And again, it's different for everyone. Maybe you're like, I don't effing draw. I'm not an artist. My creation is like just like doing a little dance party or writing poetry, or maybe your creation is making a fancy spreadsheet. Like, we don't need to have demarcations of what that looks like. Everyone is different. And the last bit, maybe this should be the first question. Maybe this is the first and foremost question, because I feel like I kept going back to it, is, do you even consider yourself creative? Because a lot of us are like, oh no, I'm not creative. Oh no. And let me tell you, and I can drop this, in the notes and what have you, is David E. Kelly has a wonderful TED Talk about, creativity and folks who don't consider themselves creatives. But once you bust through that perception and that limiting belief, like, I'm not creative, and you just like give yourself the space for it, holy moly, the sky's the limit there. Another resource that I love when it comes to creativity is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I freaking love that book. I have referred to that book so many times. I've been cited on like entrepreneurship blogs as like a business book. And it's like not, it's not a conventional business book, but for me, it's so important because it's
living a more creative life and being able to tap into that. Because here's the thing, friends, when you get an idea, whether it's a business idea or creative idea or some sort of project, if you don't like catch it and like hold on to it and work toward it, someone else is going to get it. I've definitely seen this in my own business where I'm like, man, that's a good idea. And then I like don't do anything with it. And then I'm like, oh damn, now that that person did it. It happens. It's so true. So yeah, Big Magic, hella good book. Definitely recommend if you haven't read it. Yeah. And it's just, yeah, taking the time to do things that bring you joy in a creative sense. It's like such good medicine for your soul. It brings a smile to your face. It gets your energy up and it gets you ready. It's not a waste of time. It gets you ready for the rest of the other stuff that you have to do, in my humble opinion. Okay. That was creativity. Next. Last. Next and last. Self-care. Self-care is interesting. I feel like self-care and manifestation, two buzzwords that are like hitting hard in recent times. Self-care, I feel like it's gotten tricky, especially in like the spiritual like coaching space or just in like, toxic positivity. Like, oh, let's do self-care. Here's the thing. Another one of my favorites, Glennon Doyle, she talks about this in her We Can Do Hard Things podcast. Don't fall for the trap of capitalism. You don't need to buy the newest thing. You don't need to spend all this money. You don't need to do all this shit to engage in self-care. Do what feels good for you. What feels good for you? Yeah, is it dancing? Is it dancing randomly? Is it, I know for me, I like doing I like putting on my makeup. I was telling a friend, who was I telling to? I don't know. I was telling someone that a friend lent me their what's it called? Witchcraft Therapy. I think that's the name of the book. I forget it. I think that's the title. Witchcraft Therapy, and like putting on makeup, your morning routine is like putting on a glamour. It's like getting yourself ready. It's like an energetic practice. Like that's definitely part of my self-care and like exploring new ways to do skincare and face care. The skincare bit is definitely new for me. So that's been fun to explore. But what feels good for you? Is it, for example, my husband, he loves to cook. I can cook, but it's stressful for me. Like I'm like, oh, eat, I gotta get it. But for him, that's his form of self-care. Is like cooking a beautiful meal, which is great because then I benefit from that practice. Is it reading a good book? Is it spending time with friends? I know, extrovert Rowena over here. I feel so energized. Even on those days where I'm like, oh, it's been such a bad day. As soon as I see my friends and loved ones, I'm like, whoop. And I'm energized. So find what feels good for you. And it doesn't have to cost $1,000,000. And it doesn't have to be this big, elaborate thing. Let's like take a cue from Parks and Rec, like treat yourself, but in a way that makes sense for you and doesn't put you in debt. The guilt piece is so real. This ties back to the creativity, right? Feeling shame and guilt about expressing your creativity. I feel like it's even more so for us, again, especially as women, more so for us when it comes to self-care. Like, it's like, oh, here comes the shoulds again. Oh, I should be folding the laundry, or I should be doing this, or I should be doing that. There's no need to feel that guilt, because at the end of the day, friends, like this serves you in the long run. Taking care of yourself, honoring yourself, respecting yourself, loving on yourself, doing what you need to do so that you're good is going to enable you to be able to take care of everybody else. It's so difficult. Trust me, I know it's so hard. I know for my fellow mama friends out there, it's so hard for us to take care of ourselves when we're taking care of our children, taking care of our families. But it's so crucial because again, it's like, you can't pour from an empty cup, y'all. Right? What are all the sayings, right? Like, like I can't think of the other ones, but if our stores, if we're like running on empty, if we're running on empty, it's just not gonna work. Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard to step away from that. Yeah, Kat, I agree. Okay. I already talked about this, I think, because it was like first and foremost in my mind. You don't need capitalism, y'all. F that. We don't need capitalism to feel like we're engaging in self-care. Like you can do your own DIY spa day. Like we don't, I mean, if you want to do it, and listen, I love me a good pedicure. Have I been able to do it lately? No, because I just bought a house. So I'm not like ready to engage in these practices so consistently anymore. But again, you do you. If you have the means to do it, but I'm just saying it's not required. You're not required. And in a world where these advertisements capitalize on, oh, you need to drink this thing, you need to do this exercise routine, you need to wear this shirt or whatever, right? We don't need to buy into that. And I'm a communication like media scholar, so right, like we don't have to buy into that. um Intentionality and intentionally scheduling time. Again, this is like the same. I feel like very similar to the last slide about creativity. Yeah. I'm very guilty of this, especially I feel like now that we're moving into, hard to believe, year 3 of COVID times of the pandemic. Now that we're starting to like venture out into the world again. I feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to overschedule again because I miss my people. But schedule time for yourself. Schedule time for that self-care. Listen, if you want to do it with your girlfriends or with your friends, that's cool too, but schedule that time. Make a block. There's no need to have back to back to back to back meetings. You're going to get fried. Be okay about, again, this goes back to relationships, the setting the boundaries. People understand. You're like, "Oh man, I really need a night off. I really need to, it's been a rough week. I don't think I can do this thing today." Be intentional with scheduling time. And then just to catch all, like thinking about it, what do you want to try this year? Is there something you want to try this year? Or if there's something I want to try this year, I don't know. Maybe there's like a bunch of, maybe you want to try like one of those like floating, those like salt, like floating baths or things like that. Like you go inside the thing. Maybe that's something you want to try. Again, that costs money. Or maybe you want to engage in, I'm going to take a walk every day. Maybe I should do that. I'm going to bake something every week. This is a good one. That doesn't cost any money. When I think of a friend, I'm going to call them or text them and ask them how they're doing. That's a good one because then you get connected, right? So what do you want to try this year in terms of your self-care? How do you want to change it up? How do you want to do something that makes sense for you, that feels more in alignment, right? Yeah. So, yeah, what do you want to try this year? And I believe that's the last bit. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so here's the deal yo-yo. Friends that are here, I see you, I hear you, I thank you for being here live. Friends who are watching the replay, if you haven't signed up using the link, feel free to just send me a DM. I'll give you my information. Send me a DM or send me an email, and I can send you over the files. So we have a fillable PDF workbook that basically goes through what we talked about today, all the different areas. You're doing an audit. There's 2 parts, and then there's a reflection journaling piece, right? So in the different categories, you're going to rate them. And then based off of what we talked about today, based off of the different questions, the different areas, you're going to break down like, okay, this is where I am in terms of my spiritual practice. This is where I am in terms of my creativity, but this is where I want to go, right? And that awareness and that clarity is so helpful. Why? Because when we have a sense of where we are, baseline, here's researcher Rowena, baseline, and then when we have a sense of where we want to be, that's where we can take the intentional action steps That's where we can take the the manifestation, as much as I said it's a buzzword right now, like we can do the practices to get us there, right? That clarity is helpful. If we don't know where we want to go or where we want to be in these areas, like how the hell are we going to get there, right? So this workbook can help you do that. And then a little reflection exercise. And then, for the IMM folks that are interested, I'm offering, time to spend with me, like on a one-on-one Zoom. If you're interested, let me know. Join the group. Um, and then yeah, like it's a way to get rocking and rolling for 2023. Yay! I know I'm excited too. I'm excited for the workbook too. Um, so yeah, and this is actually bothering me. The spacing is not. That's perfectionist, Rowena. We'll just stop. Let's just move on. Okay, so that was it. That was it. We got 10 minutes to spare, but here is my information. Very easy. Rowena at rowenawinkler.com is my email. Again, if you are watching the replay, if you're catching it not while we're live here and having a good time, feel free to email me or DM me, RB Winkler PhD on all the things. I'm RB Winkler PhD on Instagram, on Facebook, on what is it, YouTube, on Twitter. I don't really tweet as much. Yes. So I think it would be easiest, friends, if you want to do the workbook, if you're watching the replay or you're hanging out live, if you want to do the workbook, so then that, and then, if you want to do the workbook and then schedule the one-on-one, so then that gives us, nice, juicy info and stuff to work toward. I think that might be the best way to go about it, because then we have the information. And if you want to be even more prepared or whatever, if you want to do the workbook and send it to me after you schedule the one-on-one, then I can take a look at it even and, prepare some things prior to the meeting. But, I'm really excited to start off the new year with all of us getting realigned, all of us stepping into our authenticity. As I mentioned at the start of this, we have the full moon in Leo coming up this weekend. And for those of you that don't know, Leo is a fiery fire sign. Leo is all about just getting out there, being yourself, doing you, being able to step into your authenticity. And as you know, that's like a lot of the crap I talk about is being authentic, being who you are and not giving a crap about what anyone thinks. And that's a lifelong journey, y'all. Like, that's tough. And one way that we can get closer to that, to being our authentic, aligned selves, is by, I think it helps to slice and dice it in this way, because this work can get so freaking overwhelming. Like, I don't know where to begin. Like, how the heck am I supposed to be my authentic self? I don't even know what that means. So this workbook and this workshop, this work we did together here today, and the work that comes after it, it's a way to break it down, as an educator, like I'm here for it, right? Let's break it down into manageable pieces so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming, that it actually feels possible, because it is possible. Because I firmly believe at the end of the day, like, you have everything you need to be amazing and to make your mark on the world. And again, you don't have to be the next Oprah. I don't think any of us can be at this point, but in our own way, let's just, we have this beautiful life to leave a legacy, and to not waste so much time putting on these masks. Like, why do we need to do that? There's like no reason to, right? Like, we have this beautiful life and we're in this iteration of this life. Like, why not make the most of it and figure out like what we truly want and what we truly need, and what will truly light us up and make us feel aligned and alive alignment. And yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this. I know that I enjoyed being with you today. As always, if you have any questions at all as you're watching this, I will drop some of those links and some of those resources in the show notes, as I mentioned today. I'm looking forward to sharing the workbook with all of you and seeing what we come up with together.
And I hope you have a wonderful week. It's Monday, but Monday, maybe we can, maybe this can help us into good energy as we get into the week. And as I mentioned, as we move toward that beautiful full moon in Leo at the end of the week. So with that, I'm gonna close out here, and I hope that everyone has a lovely day. And yeah, I will. Whoops, let me go back here and I'll do my sign off music. Have a good one, y'all. Take care, and I will see you soon.